taking questions from. If you miss part of this presentation, as you can hear, this is being recorded. Your chamber will share it through eBlast and on social media. We're going to start with 3-minute opening statements from the candidates and then move to the questions that the public submitted to us. We'll be timing some responses. Candidates, you'll have a minute to answer. And if you choose to, you can also choose to ask for a rebuttal. We will close with a final 2-minute statement from all. Now, we need to pull name. We were going to gather 15 minutes before and pull names from a hat in front of all the candidates, but we couldn't get everybody on screen.
I'm ready for that, Nora.
So Kelly's got that there. So if you can tell me what order, because
I'm ready for that. So okay, I just want to, yep, thank you, Nora. I'm just going to mention one other thing. 3 minutes for your opening statement. I will hold up my fingers, 3, when you have 30 seconds remaining. So you'll want to watch the screen. Maybe someone can nudge you, but I'm going to give you a 30-second remaining. And then your rebuttal, just to clarify, you have 1 minute to answer each question. You'll have 1 minute for rebuttal. Just put your finger up if you want a rebuttal. And then the person to whom the question is asked will have the final chance for rebuttal. Do you have any questions, candidates? Okay.
Yeah, how is that going to work for us that don't have video?
I would suggest that you raise your hand. If you look at the bottom of your screen, you should be able to see an icon that says raise hand. And if you click on that, that will raise your hand. And we should be able to see that.
Yeah,
my problem
is I couldn't log into Zoom at all with the links I was provided.
Yeah, unfortunately, Doug, this is outside of our, we don't know. So I can interrupt and give you a 30-second warning if you prefer.
Okay, yeah, that'll work.
Okay, and the closing statements are how long, Nora?
I believe that we had a 2-minute closing statement.
Yeah, and I'll give you a, yeah. So if you have any questions along the way, so I have your names written here in pieces of paper that are all identical. It will determine the speaking order. So I'm going to start with the first one, which is Erin Horvath. Is number 1. The second one is Doug Maynard.
Doug, thank you.
You writing that down, Nora?
Yes, I am.
The next one is Matt Richter.
Mm-hmm.
And then that would make the last one as Brad Waddell. Okay, it's as fair as we could do it with technology the way it is. So I've got my timer started and we can begin whenever you're ready.
All right. Well, as you can see, the names were just pulled from the hat. The candidates know the order. And of course, we're going to let you know who's up. So right now, I'd like to introduce Erin Horvath from the NDP with Doug Maynard on deck. So Erin, the floor is yours.
Well, good evening, everybody. Thank you for taking the time to come in from the beautiful weather to be with us tonight. I'm going to answer everybody's very first question that they have for me right off the bat. No, I am not related to Andrea Horvath. If you look, our last names are spelt differently. A little bit more about myself. I wear multiple hats like many of us in Parry Sound-Muskoka, Magwin. One is I'm a mom of 2 teenage sons who live with me here in Huntsville. I'm also the co-executive director and co-founder of New Vision Unlimited, which is a not-for-profit community development organization that's done projects all over Ontario since 2006. And one of my enterprises is the Hub Muskoka. It's an award-winning enterprise that is a co-working center that services about 125 businesses or so. I'm also a doctoral level researcher, and I'm the social and environmental justice lead for a national charity. And specifically, I work on climate justice issues, water conservation, and First Nations rights. I have a background in both planning and policy creation. Some of my experience includes working with 2 First Nations as a land use planner for several years, as well as being a part of the Forest Stewardship Council Ontario Boreal Working Group, which created sustainable forestry standards. So that's a little bit about me. I also should mention I'm involved in Climate Action Muskoka, and I've been involved in various other climate initiatives in our riding. So why would an NDPer also be a small business supporter and vice versa? I'll tell you exactly why. I have chatted with countless business owners throughout our riding, and I'm hearing the exact same thing, which is we do not have the workers to grow our businesses. And yes, the workers, what do you need? And they say, we don't have the housing that we need, the affordable housing that we need. We don't have the childcare. Spaces are sometimes over a year long in waiting. We don't have the transportation, public transportation to get places, and wages are not affordable. You ask small businesses, they have been shut while the big box stores got to be open, and we're struggling in some cases to rebuild from this and without that worker base. So the Ndp platform gives us many of the things that we need to build that worker base up. They have actually, in many cases, left the riding. They're not in hiding somewhere. They are, in many cases, have actually left the riding, gone north or south, because it's just not affordable to be here. So we really need to work on that. And I'm looking forward to telling you about the Ndp platform, which supports workers and also supports small businesses. And generally speaking, does that by lowering or keeping steady the tax rate for lower income and middle income, as well as small businesses, while marginally raising that for the very wealthy. So I look forward to telling you more, and thank you once again for joining us.
Good job.
How did you manage to do that right on time? Especially in this form, that's pretty incredible. All right, on deck we have Doug Maynard, and we're looking forward to hearing from you, Doug. So please introduce yourself, and we'll listen in.
Okay, first of all, I would like to thank the Chamber of Commerce for hosting this debate tonight. Most importantly, I want to thank everybody who is tuning in to watch this debate. As voters, you are all facing an extremely important decision with this upcoming election. Will you choose to re-elect a premier who has consistently flip-flopped on important decisions over the last 4 years? One who has consistently shown his willingness to negotiate backdoor deals and hand out lucrative contracts and appointments to his buddies? By passing Bill 100 that enabled government to grant themselves the authority to enact measures without following proper procedures and allowing debate in legislature, Doug Ford has proven that democracy means nothing to him, and why would he change now? If you are one of those who is fed up with the PC's government's continual shift to the left, the mainstream media is going to tell you that there's only 2 other parties to vote for. I just don't believe that, and I'm here to introduce the New Blue Party as an alternative. The Ontario New Blue Party stands on traditional conservative values such as fiscal responsibility, personal rights and freedoms, accountability, transparency, and integrity in our government. We would fight to end all COVID mandates and restrictions and make sure that Ontario is never again the most severely locked down and restricted province in Canada. We would put more money into people's pockets by reducing the HST by 3%, reducing electricity rates, and ending the $100 million taxpayer subsidy that is currently paid to political parties. I myself am a lifelong resident of this riding, and I want to take action now to ensure that the people of Parry Sound-Muskoka can afford to live in this wonderful area. I want to leave our families and children a place that they can thrive and prosper for generations to come without fearing that the government will shut down our economy and restrict our rights and freedoms the way that the Ford government has done over the past couple of years. It is my sincere hope that you will consider allowing me to be your voice in Queen's Park. And on June 2nd, I hope you will vote New Blue and join me in bringing honesty and integrity back into our government. Thank you.
You had 30 seconds remaining. Perfect timing.
Thank you, Doug. Coming up next, we have Matt Richter of the Green Party of Ontario, and he will be followed by Brad Waddell. So Matt, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Nora and Kelly, Adam and Brenda. Thank you for coordinating together among your chambers to put on this evening. Bonjour, hello, and ani. My name is Matt Richter, and I am the Ontario Green Party candidate for our wonderful riding of Parry Sound-Muskoka and Almaguin. I am a father of 3. I am a small business owner, and I'm a teacher in Muskoka. And like so many of you, I too am frustrated of the status quo from one election to the next. It simply has led to more status quo. It is truly time to move beyond the old way of thinking here in our riding and make life better. Across this riding, from one election to the next, I've been crisscrossing from one community to the other, listening, building relationships, making connections. And I've heard from you that you are looking for a positive change to move forward, to tackle the problems of today so that we are setting up our future where we have our children growing into a spot that we can be proud of. I've heard you at town halls, on Zoom events, on the phone, at the door, and also importantly, at all candidate debates just like this. I'm here to listen, and that's what leadership needs today and moving forward. And on your behalf, I am ready to fight for a healthcare system that not only honors new hospitals, but also honors the patients and the very people that care for us. I'm ready to fight for affordable housing that's affordable to live in, and for fairness for small businesses, and a way forward to tackle the climate crisis where we all succeed together. Everyone, thank you so much for being here this evening. I look forward to listening to your concerns, your issues, your challenges, and hopefully your solutions too. And I look forward to that dialogue as the evening progresses. Thank you, merci, and miigwech.
Thank you, Matt. Brad Waddell of the Populist Party, Ontario. Brad, you're on screen and we're ready to hear from you.
Thank you. And as the others have said, I want to thank the Chamber for putting this together and for reaching out and having all of us get involved and giving everybody a chance to speak here. The Populist Party is another, like the New Blue, a new party that was formed out of frustration. I've never done anything like this before. But I look down the list, and again, as the media will tell you, there are 3 parties to choose from. That is not true. All of us in the Populist Party are new to this. None of us have held a seat before. We're not led by a politician. There are no politicians. We are working men and women who are fed up. So much so that we're taking a stand to bring some integrity back into politics and to bring some common sense into the way things are done. As Doug pointed out, the lockdowns were ineffective. We knew they were ineffective for over a year, and yet the Ford government kept pushing them. And the other governments or other parties complained that he wasn't doing enough when he was already killing our economy here. So we've got a plan to get the economy moving again. We know future problems are going to come. The federal government has made prices of fuel and of food unreachable for some people. We've got a plan to make it more affordable. Housing is an issue in this area. And when you're talking to people on the street, all they talk about the price of gas, the price of living here. And I'm talking to business owners who cannot find workers because the government provides more money than the small business can pay for them. We need to get people motivated to work and to allow the businesses to grow in this community. We need to build with always keeping in mind the infrastructure, the nature that's around us here. We need to keep the waterways clean to make this an attractive place to visit, because that's a big part of our economy, but also an attractive place to live and an affordable place to live. And so I'm looking forward to questions that the people are going to ask, because I'm sure they're going to be in around these concerns. Healthcare is a big concern. And again, I'm looking forward to answering your questions and explaining what our plan is to get things done in more of a business-like and more of a common sense model, and not a rulership overlording type of model. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Brad. I'm just going to quickly start my video. For those of you that are just joining, you realize that I am not Pamela Steele, who was to be your moderator tonight. And so we've talked a lot about frustration already, and I won't go into broadband frustration, but we do have that. So we're going to move into the question and answer period. I am going to turn off my camera because of broadband connectivity, but I can hear everyone, and hopefully you can hear me as well.
Can I just add something, Nora? Brad, if you could speak up a little louder when responding, and all of you could maybe just lower or raise your voices a bit, that would be great. But Brad in particular was quite faint. Thank you.
Right, thank you. We start tonight's Q&A period with questions from our sponsor partner, the Lakelands Association of Realtors. The following questions are for all candidates who wish to answer. So we're going to start with, I bet you can guess, the housing affordability crisis. It's rooted in a serious lack of supply. This affects not only first-time home buyers, but housing for those who work in our local tourism industry. This directly impacts our economy as workers are being forced to look elsewhere as they can't find housing. If elected, how would you ensure more homes or housing opportunities are made available for younger generations to live and work in our community? So if elected, how would you do that? Who would like to tackle that question first? And just speak up if you're not on screen. Oh, I got,
I don't mind going first.
Matt? Oh, I've got Doug Maynard. Actually, I think Doug kind of beat you to the punch there, Matt. So Doug, take it away from the New Blue Party.
Okay, thanks. So I realize that the cost of housing has just gone completely out of control. Most people can't afford to buy a house right now. However, I do tend to lean more towards the opinion that the crisis really isn't necessarily one of the number of units we have available. As I look around the area, it looks like there's way more luxury homes and condos being built than there are
30 seconds
homes designed for the average person that the average person can afford to buy. So that tells me that we need a government that is now going to try to push back against that a little bit and try and put some incentives in for builders and developers to start looking at actually building houses that the average person can buy.
Thank you, Doug.
Part of that will involve having to fight to reduce.
Doug. Sorry.
Thank you, Doug. Over to Matt Richter.
Very important question. As we know, the lack of affordable housing is not anything new. It's been building from one election to the next. And we have heard loud and clear that the lack of affordable housing is an education issue. It's also a healthcare issue. And it is, in the spirit of tonight, it is definitely an economic issue. This is one of the #1 priorities that businesses across our riding, from Parry Sound to Muskoka up through to Omagwin, have cited as their biggest challenge. They need to have more housing so that people can afford to live here and afford to work here. We need to prioritize the government getting back into the business of building affordable housing units. And that means saying no to a $10 billion highway south of us, and yes to building over 100,000 affordable rental units to get the job done.
Brad Waddell, you had your hand up next.
Yes, I wasn't sure how to jump in. I was about to speak when they picked on there, but everybody everybody is talking about the same thing, affordable housing. We have a couple of issues here. As far as rent is concerned, we need to kind of scale back the number of Airbnbs that people are using rental properties for short term. It's very profitable, and I don't begrudge somebody making a living, but we may have too many of them. That's part of what's driving up the rent and making fewer places to rent. And again, I'll get on board with the building more or using more public buildings. Here in Berks Falls, where I live, we took an old school and converted it into affordable spaces, affordable apartments now that I don't believe are all full. So there's room here and there's room for more, and we can do that more efficiently in other places around this riding.
Thank you. And Erin?
So the Ndp has a plan called Homes You Can Afford. Some highlights are to remove the exclusionary zoning, which is in place, which makes it so that we can't build the array of housing that we need. So changing this would allow us to have multiplexes, duplexes, triplexes, granny lane, suites, basement apartments, a whole range that would give more diversity. So that's one part of it. 250,000 geared to income or below market rent housing to help to increase the rent base, because that is what workers need. 10% down payment for folks who are in the vicinity of being able to buy a home. So for new home buyers, needing to deal with the speculation. So increasing the non-resident speculation tax to 20%, like like they have in BC and Toronto, but expand it out now across the province. And yes, regulating some of the Airbnbs, but also as part of that is we need to deal with the Landlord-Tenant Act. And perhaps during rebuttal, I'll explain a little bit more because I am a landlord and I know that there's a problem in how we're handling that in rural Ontario.
Thank you.
Matt is asking for a rebuttal.
Yeah, I would like to rebut the Conservative government and what they haven't been doing, as this has been a pressing issue and they have had the past 4 years to really bring action. And this is why it's a horrendous issue when I talk to people across our riding, when they hear that the Ford Conservatives are planning on spending over $10 billion on 2 unnecessary highways, carving through farmland and paving over wetland. This is just unacceptable. We also have to ensure that that money can be going towards these affordable housing units that we require. And we have to crack down on house flippers. You know, right here in our province, we have people who are buying more homes and they already own 2 homes. So the Green Party is proposing a 20% tax on those who already own 2 homes or more the moment they buy a 3rd house. That's a significant cause of the driving of people moving out and coming up to an area that they still can't afford up here. It's a necessary step, and we can use that 20% tax to also help fund the necessary builds that are so desperately required here in Muskoka.
Brad also has a rebuttal.
Yeah, I'd like to comment too on I didn't even know this was a thing until while I was out campaigning and talking to people on the street, but apparently the government does allow a $20,000, I guess it's a grant for first-time buyers, but it stops at Novar. And I'm north of Novar, I know, and I heard about it from people in South River who would like to buy a house up here. So there's no reason why that shouldn't be, why there should be a limit on that. If that's for first-time buyers for homes in Ontario, I don't see why that cannot cover the whole Parry Sound-Muskoka district.
Well, fortunately, Brad, the Ontario Green Party is putting a $25,000 credit out to help homeowners retrofit homes into granny suites and duplex and triplexes. So with your vote, I'm more than happy to
that includes putting out rent, but that does include allowing people to buy a home. And as a homeowner, as somebody who's going to, part of the equity in my home is my retirement plan. I think people should be able to own property, not just keep making the people who own it wealthier by paying off their mortgage for them. I'd like a plan that allows people to have their own home, build their own business, have control of their own lives.
Thank you, gentlemen.
And that provides a perfect transition for me into the next question.
I think
from our
partner. Nora. Erin
sorry?
has a rebuttal and we haven't given Doug a chance to rebut either. So Erin, go ahead.
So yeah, I just wanted to comment about the Landlord-Tenant Act. So we need to differentiate between what's going on in urban settings and rural settings. In rural settings, people like me, I'm a solo person and I own a duplex because of something I inherited when my parents both died. And what happens is that in our riding, a lot of people have taken their rentals off the market because they are unsure that they're going to be able to remove a tenant who is not paying them. And the way that it is right now, it doesn't even allow someone like me to give someone a chance. And then have them, timely removed if they're unable to pay. So this has actually caused a lot of cold feet, where folks that normally would have their what now is their Airbnb in the rental market are not doing that. And I've heard about that on droves. So we do need to address the rental market by protecting our tenants, but we also need to come up with a fair way to address our landlords, because so many of us are just regular folks, and it's renting neighbor to neighbor.
Thank you, Erin. And Doug, do you have anything to add here?
No, I'm good for now. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay,
Great.
back to you, Nora.
Thank you. And I just want to make it clear that you don't need to provide a rebuttal unless you feel that there is something to rebut. So I want to continue on this vein. And this time we're going to go in reverse from how we answered the first question. And it's still about housing, again, from our Lakelands Association of Realtors, very specifically, and Erin touched on a little bit. How will you support making it easier for first-time home buyers to get into the market? How do you plan on doing this? So you've touched on a little bit, but let's get more specific. First-time home buyers, how do we make it easier for them to get in? And Erin, you get to start first because you had the last on the first beginning question.
So one would be, like I said, a 10% down payment for new home buyers, but the other bit of it is removing this exclusionary zoning so that we can have a variety of types of places for people to build, to rent, to make home in, right? So that's a really key part, because right now there's no shortage of people building houses in our riding, but they're often so much bigger than what the average person can afford. So working on creating things that are downsized, that's not only, you know, a good idea economically, but it also helps with energy efficiency and carbon as well, right? So that's also part of it. And then the NDP would be giving grants to allow people to do energy retrofits, which actually does contribute to affordability because it decreases energy costs, right? So making sure that all our new builds are energy efficient helps reach our carbon targets, but then it also creates homes that are not so costly on the energy side of things. So those are a few things that come to mind immediately.
All right, before we go to rebuttal, Brad has the next chance to speak to this. What would your party do, Brad?
We've addressed a little bit already about increasing the, but you know, I'd like Erin's plan about decreasing the down payment needed, possibly increasing the length of time for a mortgage to get more young people the ability to buy a home. There's a lot of focus around rent. I like to see ownership and being able to make the homes more affordable, a grant to get them started as first-time buyers, any way to make the overall cost a little bit lower. And that would include building some smaller homes in the area that, again, are a more affordable price range, but always having to keep in mind the environment around us. We don't want a ton of duplexes and high-rise buildings or anything like that that's going to take away from the natural beauty in Parry Sound-Muskoka. So there's got to be a balance made there, if not just building everything or building rental properties that help other people become wealthy, properties that people can invest themselves in for their own future, their own retirement, as I've done here.
Matt Richter, first-time home buyers, how would you go about that?
First-time home buyers are needing good public policy. You know, when I've been out door to door for the past year and crisscrossing through Bracebridge, Gravenhurst, and Huntsville in particular, and other areas, but we have to have homes being prioritized that aren't the cookie cutter Mattamy home style subdivisions that are increasing sprawl and decimating our urban forests. You know, right in Bracebridge, right behind the high school, we've seen that town losing its forest just so that homes can start at $1 million, as we're currently seeing. Same in Gravenhurst and same in Huntsville. We need the balance and we need the sensible public policy that promotes building up smaller homes, tiny homes. We need laneway homes, granny suites being encouraged, and rent to own so that we can ensure that our next generation are getting into places that they want to move into. And we also have to remember that when it comes to our seniors and our elderly, that they have options to downsize into. Currently, they feel stranded that they can't move or downsize from the house they're in because there's nothing available. And they're holding on to a house that could be affording for other families.
I appreciate that answer. Doug Maynard, would you like to speak to how you would go about getting first home buyers into homes here?
Yes, I would, thanks. When it comes to the costs involving building a house, one of the big things is all of the bureaucratic red tape and the developing and building fees associated with that. I think government needs to look at reducing that and making it easier for people to get to the point where they're ready to build a house, and builders don't have to pass on all of those extra red tape fees onto the buyers. That would go a long way, in my opinion, to making new housing starts more affordable for first-time buyers. And plus, in conjunction with New Blue's plan, we believe putting more money in people's pockets by cutting the HST, reducing hydro rates. All that is going to put more money into people's pockets so that they have money to invest in new homes and a better way of life for themselves.
Any rebuttal? Anyone else for rebuttal other than Erin?
Erin, and then Matt.
Okay.
I just wanted to add that we need to have political will here. We have a power dynamic at play. We always have with, big outside money, cottager money, coming in to influence the type of builds that happen. And so just as a case in point, a lot of people have been bringing up to me at the door, they're concerned that on April 28th, Graydon Smith, the Conservative candidate, hosted a $1,000 ticket fundraiser in Toronto with MPP Steve Clark, presumably with cottagers who own property here but do not actually vote here. And so to me, that just speaks to our need to have people who are representing our needs. And here we don't even have our Conservative candidate here. So we're talking about things that matter to regular folks who live here, and we need leaders who take the time to attend these things and make this the priority, as opposed to the $1,000 fundraisers elsewhere with folks with big money that have an agenda for our area. So not directly related, but directly related. Worth mentioning, especially since it's the concerns of people.
Thank you. Matt?
I'd like to further just connect the dots between what we've been seeing for quite some time between how the seniors and new families moving into new homes can really be merged together. What we've seen even here in Huntsville, a perfect example, there's an elderly lady who unfortunately lost her husband recently, and she's in a substantially large home, but she can't move out of there because there's no long-term care, there's no co-housing, there's nothing to downsize to. So here she is in a 4-bedroom, 3-bathroom house, and she can't move out of there. And we would have families that could be moving to that house as long as the seniors and elderly who choose to, because I know so many people are desperate to continue living at home with proper aging at home strategies. But for those that want to move on, we have to build up the seniors housing as well to enable young families to move into a house and achieve ownership for the first time.
Thank you. All right. We could talk about housing all evening long, but we've got to get to some other things. And I appreciate some of the questions. Mary from Bala and others asked very similar questions and putting together the lack of affordable housing and staff shortages. If we have time, we'll get back to that. But on labor issues regarding staff shortages and housing, because all of this is circular, over 60% of businesses are experiencing labor shortages. They're not going away. How do you plan to address those long-standing shortages that have been made worse by the pandemic? Who would like to take that first? Speak up. Brad, go ahead.
Yes, I've heard a couple of the other candidates say it's a lack of workers in the area, and I disagree with that. I talked to a business owner just a few days ago who said that she can't get workers because they're making more money from the CERB and from other government benefits than she can pay them. And I think that's something that we need to discourage. We need to get people encouraged to work and to work for their dinner, to work for their lives, and do that themselves. So when she can't get people because it's easier for them to stay at home and collect your tax dollars, I don't think that's fair. And a lot of people don't think that's fair. We can get more people working if there's an incentive to work, and maybe top up if minimum wage isn't quite enough. A top up to people who are working instead of a full handout to people who are doing nothing is more of the approach that I think we should be taking.
Matt Richter, how would you address long-standing staff shortage problem?
And moving beyond the housing, because that is the number one, but beyond that is ensuring that there is a fair living wage, that the minimum wage rises and people can afford to live up here, let alone get a house, that they can afford to actually live up here. And that's critical. I'm going to just set the record here, though, that 20% of our population in Ontario and Canada, for the first time in our history, has gone above the age of 65. So there are multiple reasons why there is a shortage of workers here. And I know the people of Parry Sound-Muskoka, for the majority, are not lazy, and they are wanting to get out there and work. And I know small business owners want to meet the needs of raising. They want to raise the wages. I hear it from so many business owners, they can't afford to do that because of different red tape policies. There are some, of course, and we address this. Business owners know the importance of increasing their minimum wage and paying their employees a fair living wage and increasing it. They know that. They need assistance, and that's where the government can come in and give that temporary assistance to ensure that businesses can afford the salaries they deserve.
Thank you.
Thank you. Did anybody else want to speak to this? Erin, please.
So yeah, there's a few things in here that I wanted to press back on. One is I speak every single day to small business owners all over the place. I've started to photograph folks that are already paying well above minimum wage. They understand that when they pay their employees well, there's that loyalty there, as well as there's a cost saving because they don't have to keep recruiting. So it's actually a myth to say that all folks cannot pay well, or that that's the reason why there's a worker shortage. We need to raise the minimum wage floor substantially. We need to do it in such a way that offsets the costs for our small businesses. Absolutely. But we also have to deal with, on top of the housing, childcare. So several people have said they cannot work because there's no childcare. They're sitting at home and they want to. It's not, Brad, because they're lazy. It's that some of the jobs they just can't get to because their life circumstances make it impossible. So they live in Novar, but they don't have public transit to get to Huntsville. They're out of luck, right? So there's some of these really practical things that we have to be addressing in order to make this riding conducive to people having the opportunity.
And Doug, did you want to speak to this?
Yeah, I would lean towards the same direction that Erin was just bringing up. The minimum wage needs to be allowing people to make a living and be able to survive in this economy. And I think with the size of our area, we definitely need to do more for public transit to make it possible for people to get to and from work without having to pay the crazy cost of gas that we pay now. And childcare is another huge one. I know a lot of people that if they can afford childcare, they can't arrange it for the times that they're required to work. So we need to come up with a more stable childcare system that will accommodate these people that don't just work straight 8 to 4 or 9 to 5 hours Monday to Friday, but any time of day that they need to work, they can get their children taken care of.
Thank you. Unless there is a rebuttal, I think that we were back and forth. Erin, you did want to speak again? 1 minute.
I want to definitely a rebuttal. So the NDP would propose that we need to be raising the minimum wage to $20 an hour by 2026 in regular increments of $1 per hour per year raise. The Green Party would say we need to do a living wage. If you consult with the experts about poverty reduction, the living wage is a wonderful way to mark the target. But what actually happens when you implement it is you ghettoize regions. So if this region over here has a lower living wage and this one has a higher, businesses will migrate to the lower paying ones so that they can pay workers less. The other thing that happens is you can have two businesses just across the metaphorical road. So the workers are doing the exact same things, say as a Tim Hortons or whatever, but one worker gets paid more, one gets less. So the way to do it is to raise the wage floor while always keeping an eye on what that living wage is. So that we know where the minimum wage needs to be raised to. So I just want to point that out, and that is absolute science based on what the experts are saying. So just wanted to let you know that.
Matt?
If I could add in one more point too, it comes back to the role that government has. It doesn't always have to be assistance, it's also good public policy and making good announcements. When Doug Ford started off in 2018 and came into our riding and said, buck a beer in the Lake of Bays brewery. When Lake of Bays and no craft brewer or any of our local economy thriving through craft brewers, none of them can even come close to making beer for $1. It's around $1.40 to $1.50 back at that time, and it's increased. We can't have a government that's going to undermine the very business in our riding of Parry Sound-Muskoka. It's shameful. And gimmicks like buck a beer, they may make a few headlines, but they have lasting effects. Our craft brew business right here from Parry Sound to Muskoka and actually up to the South River Brewery, they were appalled that a premier who is no longer for business, just more for gimmicks, would actually have the audacity to come into our riding and say that. It was shameful, and we need to do better, and we need to liberate local beer and make sure that the conditions are there for them to thrive.
Thank you. All right, I'd like to move on unless I also want to just explain to the people watching that Doug Maynard's at a bit of a disadvantage here because it is actually not his screen. He's only speaking through the telephone. So that's why you're seeing a top of the ceiling if you're looking and wondering why you're seeing that. So I thought it was fair to be able to mention that. I'd like to do a bit of a rapid fire round on this one.
Nora,
just see, yeah.
Sorry, Brad does have a rebuttal and I don't know.
Oh, I'm sorry, I couldn't see that, Brad.
Sorry, I had raised my hand a few times. I let Erin finish speaking, and then I guess you forgot that I was there.
Okay, that's why we're here.
I would like to speak to the raising of the minimum wage because I hear it a lot. It's a vicious cycle that you're getting into. You raise the minimum wage, the cost of doing business go up, the price of everything goes up, and the minimum wage is not enough to live on anymore. And you're just going to keep tumbling. Yes, you are just going to keep tumbling over and over and over yourself again and again and again. We need to lower the cost of living, not raise the wage of living. And we're not going to do that by making it more expensive to do business in here. That's what needs to be addressed. We need to lower some of the red tape that the government has got now. Childcare was a concern that come up. Childcare is a concern that comes up. We do have to protect children. I get that, but there's a lot of red tape against somebody trying to open up a daycare. I'm sure that we can eliminate some of that red tape and open up more. These are now opportunities for ladies to make a living at home. Bringing in a few other kids and helping someone else be able to go and get a job now and do the things that we talked about well. And we also have a plan to increase the public transit in our area to deal with the $2 price of gas.
So I could see a few people chopping at the bit to jump in there. Erin had her hand up.
I think we're not doing a second round of rebuttal.
All right.
Well, then, you know what?
You can include it in your closing statements.
Yeah, Brad, you just set me up though for what I was asking for the rapid fire round, because Cal from Bala wants to know, where do you stand on universal basic income? So who wants that one? Brad.
I am very much against universal income. It eliminates the ability of people to strive to move forward and to gain for themselves and to grow for themselves, to have that pride of building something on your own. If everybody's limited to the same income, you're looking at communism, which has never worked anywhere, and it's not going to work here either.
Who wants to respond? Matt?
A basic income guarantee or a guaranteed annual income is something that is progressive and is seen to work across the world in different jurisdictions. It was working in Lindsay, Ontario when the test pilot was working, and unfortunately the Conservative government axed it. Right now, we have an ODSP system and an Ontario work system that is so difficult to navigate for those recipients in need. What we're saying is first steps first to get towards the basic income guarantee is that we prioritize doubling the current Ontario Disability Support Program payments immediately. And we do that by not prioritizing gimmicks like a license plate sticker rebate. If we have all this money that can give that the government feels that it can give money back to people who have multiple cars and have multiple wealth, and yet our seniors who can't drive and those in marginalized conditions and don't even have a vehicle got nothing from that rebate announcement. That's shameful. We hear a government saying that they can hand money back. They're giving money back to the wrong people. Our people in our riding, there is hurt in our riding. They need assistance, real assistance, and that comes from doubling the ODSP.
Right. Thank you, Matt. And we're already sort of in rebuttal mode as we speak to this. Erin, go ahead.
So just to echo, the science on it is that basic income is the way to go. Here's why, Brad, is that when you want to incentivize people to work, right? Not penalize them for working. And the way that the system is set up right now, if somebody, is say able to get some income, whether they're on disability or otherwise, it's clawed back. And so it actually creates an environment where people would not want to. The other thing is that my aunt used to work in this professionally, and she said the amount of money that goes into managing the bureaucratic system to have all of these caseworkers, you can streamline that. So you're taking less money out of that, putting it into a basic dignified income, but then creates the wraparound support so people can build through, have basic security to get an increased education, to begin to move forward with their employment in a meaningful way. People spend hours running around to their appointments just to keep the basic benefits that they do have. So it's really quite undignified.
Okay, and I'm told that I missed a rebuttal from Doug. And Doug, I would suggest because we can't see you, if you need to rebut, then please raise your hand so I know. Doug, did you want to speak to this?
Yeah, I think the idea of a guaranteed basic income makes sense on some levels, but until we make the cost of living return to something that's manageable, the basic income isn't going to work. It's just not going to be financially feasible. So I think we need to look at programs that are going to make living more affordable, such as our plan to cut HST. We've got a plan to reduce hydro rates, which will allow people to have a little bit more money in their pockets And then once we get inflation under control, we can then start to look at having a basic minimum income that people need to live on.
Thank you, Doug. And now we're into rebuttal, Nora. So if everyone, I see Matt wants to rebut, Erin wants to rebut. Brad, do you want to rebut? No. And Doug? Anything?
Go ahead, Matt.
Okay, go ahead, Matt.
No, not right at the moment.
Okay, thank you.
We have a duty to show strong leadership and show that we live in a caring society in the year 2022 Ontario. You know, and this is why the current government has been so out of touch. When Doug Ford champions a nickel off a liter of gas, which might bring $3 to $4 per week as a way of savings, and for the people who drive cars, plus the license plate sticker rebate, that's not going to answer the cost of living. The cost of living, people across this riding, they want fairness. They're not looking for handouts. It starts simply by raising ODSP to 2 times the amount is a great start to ensuring that we can work towards a basic income guarantee for those in need. It is about compassion and connecting the dots. If we have people that are living in a dignified way, it sets them up for a future where they can take advantage of the opportunities that are in front of them. They can't take advantage of anything if they can't afford the very means of life through the food that they require to sustain a healthy existence. This is about connecting the dots. And it reminds me how out of touch Ford and the Conservatives have been over the past 4 years.
And I apologize, Doug. I realize in your situation, you can't raise your hand because of the odd video situation we have. Erin did have her hand up, though. I believe that she had a rebuttal.
So just in general, I wanted to just point out that when we hear these sort of mythologies around stigmatizing these sort of things, it tells me that people who are making decisions are not close enough to the ground to actually understand how all the moving parts fit together. So like I said, we need to deal with the dignity. We have partners that are saying to us, we also need to stop privatizing aspects of our system, because when we do that, we're creating not the wraparound care that we need, but sort of incentivizing people to do things like try to find people jobs without trying to deal with the reason why they don't have the jobs. So reinstating the basic income pilot project, the NDP would want to do that and finish it off and see what does it look like. Because when we have that data, that's when we can start to make informed decisions, not ones we're imposing a morality into it, but actually looking at how does the system function, what would create a better result, and what would be a better result for the people involved as well. So I just wanted to point that out. And ODSP rates do need to double, and the NDP is committed to that as well.
All right. Did I miss anyone on that, on universal? Okay, Doug?
Nope.
You're okay. Okay, good. We're going to move on. Joe is asking, he says, we've witnessed an increase during the pandemic of hate speech, racism, and erosion of public safety. What is your party and what is your party planning to do to address this issue, as well as mend the fabric of our society? He also specifically asks, how are you personally going to help mend the tear in the Muskoka fabric? So again, he's asking about hate speech, racism, erosion of public safety on the rise. What would your party plan to do on that? Who would like to answer that question first? I'm not seeing hands. I might have to. So, Matt, then you're on.
No, absolutely. Throughout Ontario, Islamophobia is at its highest rate right now, where we need cross-party support to ensure that the London Family Act definitely moves forward. And I was proud to be there with the Liberals and the NDP when bringing attention to that. You know, and across the anti-racism that we've been seeing and anti-Indigenous, the actions are horrific. Just this morning, I was down in Simcoe North, and our local Green candidate, who's from Rama, she had hate speech, and it was misogynist, it was despicable, it was racist, and just absolutely deplorable. Now, this candidate had the choice to step back, but she stood up. This young woman stood up and ensured that she's going to show the example moving forward. And this is where politicians have to come across party lines and speak up and set the example of strong leadership and say that this is clearly not acceptable. And we are part of growing this acceptance through our communities, that this is never going to be continuing and it's not part of our society.
So I want to remind people too that the question is, so what will your party do about this? I'm going to go to Doug Maynard. I'm going to go to Doug Maynard first. Doug, what would your party do to reduce a rise in what we're seeing in hate speech and what Matt just described?
Well, I think first of all, Matt hit the nail on the head. This is an issue that governments have to come together from. We can't have party bickering. We can't have a premier that is making a living off of creating divisiveness between people. We need to start coming back together again. So a new blue party would be putting forth a policy where that stuff would not be tolerated at any level in government, that any government member that chose to try to create that divisiveness or spew the hatred would be removed from any further discussions on the matter. And we just really need to remember that we're all in this together, and we can't be falling victim to the governments that are trying to create this divisiveness amongst people and create situations where somebody is viewed as differently just because of their race or their beliefs.
Thank you, Doug.
Thank you, Doug. Erin Horvath?
Yeah, so this is an area that the NDP is really big on. You saw me looking down. It's because there's so much written that I'm not sure where to start. I'll tell you some of the key points. So implement a provincial anti-racism strategy to be informed by race-based data collection. So we can't cover our eyes and pretend that there is nothing going on because we just don't want to collect the data on it. We need to train for all public employees and legislators. We need to adequately fund and support community organizations that are already doing anti-racism and LGBTQ+ work. We need to establish an Ontario Anti-Racism Advisory and Advocacy Council. We need to implement an anti-racism strategy and an LGBTQ+ strategy in our schools. Basically, if people cannot feel safe, we are doing the system a disadvantage by making it so that people are not finishing school, right? Because they do not feel safe there. Passing the Ontario, our London Family Act would be another part, as well as launching the LGBTQ+ Inclusion Action Plan. Those are just a few to start it off.
Thanks, Erin.
My pleasure.
Brad?
You know what, I absolutely agree with what has been stated already. This goes across parties. This is something that society has to work with. It's also a problem that was exasperated by the lockdown. We're telling people within their own families not to get together for Thanksgiving dinner. I mean, that's just ridiculous. We need to have a government that includes people and more events where people get together. It's an education issue. It's an understanding that a different culture is not something to be hated or despised or to be yelled at or anything like that. We should come together and appreciate each other's cultures, appreciate each other's heritage. And that comes from education. That starts in the schools. That starts with the children. And it's certainly something the parents have to back up, because if they go home and hear something different, it's going to change. So it's something we all need to focus on making changes in, for sure.
And I just want to be clear, let's on the, if we're rebutting, we should be rebutting something that someone has said. It's not really an opportunity to just add on, but since we've allowed that, I'll give you another chance to speak to it a little bit, Matt.
I've heard some candidates tonight talk about what can be done and with different programs. I'd like to give a shout out to all the teachers across all of Ontario as the education critic and right here in Trillium Lakeland District School Board of the great work already being done by teachers when there's campaigns like Speak Up, Stand Up, and Stamp It Out for racism. Now, the problem here, though, is you have a Conservative government that does not bring the funding required to fully implement these programs. So there are initiatives, there are programs that are there, they just need the adequate funding. And when it comes to hate against Indigenous peoples, when the Ford government canceled the Indigenous curriculum writing project, that is beyond shameful. This was going to give guidance how to integrate and celebrate the Indigenous community into all guidance of our curriculum and celebrate and honor what they have. This was the first step. And they had the shameful notion to actually cancel the Indigenous curriculum writing. That's inexcusable. We have to reinstate that and really address the educational calls to action in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission as an absolute starting point.
Thank you, Matt. And I'm going to just wrap on this one. I'm sorry, we have a lot of questions to finish. I know, Erin, you'd like to speak to it, but there's a lot more you're going to want to speak to as well. So I really need to get to more of these public questions. Kyle from Kearney speaks about our remote communities suffering from a crippling lack of broadband infrastructure. What is your plan for bringing fiber to the home expansion to our communities that are criminally underserved by current options? What would you do to fast track such an expansion? This was a question asked by several people. Erin, I'm sorry I cut you off there, but if you would like to take this one first, or again, okay, a moment, or would someone else like to speak to that first?
I wouldn't mind speaking to that if I may.
Oh, Brad, go ahead, Brad.
Part of, I didn't get a chance to, or didn't take the opportunity in my introduction to say that I work in the IT field. I work from home. I'm in favor of high broadband in this area, certainly faster Ethernet, internet, and I understand the people in. I'm just out of the way for fiber. I think it's a bit ridiculous. It's at the corner of my street, but it can't come down here. So I would absolutely support an initiative, whether it's an investment in the infrastructure by the province or some encouragement to the companies that do it to get started here. And then perhaps there's an opportunity there as well to create some jobs in the area in that field as well, and to open up the possibility for telecommuting allows more people to move to this community because they don't have to pay $2 a liter of gas to go to work. They can work from home. And you know, there's so many benefits involved in having that here that it's a matter of taking a look at how we can add it. Do we need to encourage investment or make the investment to get to those communities so they have the opportunity?
Thank you. Matt had his hand up. Matt?
When it comes to internet broadband and accelerating the growth, there are plans in place from the federal government, which requires working across levels of government, certainly. But there's also promises from the Ford government before the election began that we need to hold, and I'm looking forward to being a strong independent voice down at Queen's Park to hold whichever government's in power to account, to follow through on the funding announcements that have already been established. We've seen the Ford Conservatives say one thing when it comes to hospitals and then just promise architectural drawings. We've seen them promise Northlander funding only to come back with 2012 version funding that's not going to even get the job done. When it comes to broadband, the funding, the announcements, it's exhausting from what I hear from people saying. They've been there. We need to now show that we're holding the government to account to follow through on their actions.
All right, thank you. Erin, I had put you on the spot there. Do you want to take it now or should we go to Doug?
I can take it now. I was trying to see if I could find the actual numbers, but they're somewhere in my notes. So yes, the NDP wants to invest in this, but specifically, internet is no longer just an optional thing or a, you know, maybe you need it, maybe you don't. It becomes an accessibility issue. We see this with our online schooling, right? And some places are just, I mean, Nora's offline right now because it's not, you know, strong enough. So we need to be bringing these sort of things back into a public realm, understanding that similar to like hydro and things like that, when we privatize it, we increase the cost. So we need to create a system in some ways so that it can bring that cost down. And yes, we do need to expand it. And we need to make sure that we're not doing something like, you know, province-wide online schooling when we don't actually have that as a fair and equitable resource for our people. So that definite investment in that and definite seeing this as a necessity, not an optional service anymore.
Thank you. And Doug Maynard, did you want to speak to this?
Yes, I would. So I think government would need to be very careful with how they approach expanding broadband. I think government needs to play a role in encouraging internet providers to be reinvesting more of their profits into expanding services rather than just giving them money to go ahead and do that and keep making a profit off it. So I think we need to give them incentive to do it, yes, but it also falls upon the internet companies themselves to reinvest. They're getting rich off people that are paying for their internet, and a lot of times all you hear is reduced services, reduced quality of services. They need to be reinvesting that money and making sure that broadband is available everywhere to the people in this riding.
Thank you, Doug. I think that's everyone. And if everyone's amenable, I think it would be better if we didn't have rebuttal going forward so that we can get more questions in and you can maybe weave your rebuttals into your closing statements. Is that okay? Yeah. There's a lot of topics that still need to be reached. Doug, sorry, were you going to say something?
No, I was just saying I have no problem with leading rebuttals and just putting them in the closing statement.
Okay, just because we've got quite a few more questions and we only have 15 minutes left. So I'll hand it back to you, Nora.
We're very mindful of your time, of the candidates' time, and appreciate them being with us here tonight. We know that we can't have a strong business community without a resilient healthcare system. How would you bolster healthcare in Ontario, in Muskoka and in Ontario? And we could talk, we haven't actually even talked about COVID tonight. We don't have to, but let's just talk about generally, what is your plan to bolstering healthcare in Ontario? And Brad, I'm going to go to you first on this.
Thank you. I was jumping at the gun to speak on this one. In my travels around, I've talked to a lot of nurses and support workers in the hospital, and the resounding feedback I'm getting from them is they're frustrated with the overabundance of administration in the hospitals, the fact that administrators are getting bonuses while nurses are getting burned out and leaving the hospitals. Those right in just in our riding alone here. So I've truly, my standpoint has always been that the government could function more the way a business runs. We can't just print more money when we need it. We've got to find ways to work more efficiently. And I think we can cut the number of administrators in the hospital, use that savings to increase the number of nurses and support workers that the patients actually need to make a more efficient hospital system without having to increase a lot of expense on the people's behalf. It can be just run better. And that's just a fact.
Doug Maynard, I know you've got your hand up. You want to get in on this, so take it away from you, Blue, please.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so when it comes to healthcare, we've got a government right now that, they inherited a system that was falling apart, but they only enabled it and turned a blind eye to watch it fall apart farther. They put in mandates with COVID that forced PSWs and nurses to lose their jobs over vaccination status. We need to rehire those people and start treating them with the dignity that our healthcare workers deserve. And as far like they need to be making a better wage, we got to get rid of the wage freeze on nurses. We need to get PSWs more trained for one thing, and a higher wage for them so that they can actually afford to work in that field. I know a lot of people that work as PSWs and they're barely scraping by. They deserve a lot better than that. A new blue government would certainly be supportive of those type of things.
Erin, your party's plan on that?
So currently our province invests 10% less per capita than all the other provinces on average. Yet we use our healthcare system to decide when we're going to shut down all of our businesses and our schools. So we need to invest in that, get it up to standards. We need to remove Bill 124, which is the act that has frozen the wages for healthcare workers as well as education workers and others. We need to invest in the people who are doing the work. So yes, it's good to invest in hospital builds for the future, but that's not the same as care right now. We need to invest early in interventions because it saves the system money. It saves people from going to the emergency room. So mental health under OHIP, pharmacare for low income, dental care for low income. Yes, that's spending, but it's spending less than putting it in the emergency room. So it makes sense. And then long-term care needs to move under publicly or from private to publicly funded. We know that the death rates were much higher in the private homes and much, much lower, in the tune of about 5.7% versus around.
Thank you, Matt.
You know, such an important question and a lingering issue and challenge from the first time I ran. I remember back in 2014 at the corner of Wellington at the Tim Hortons, standing side by side with the personal support workers demanding fairness then. And then when Bill 124 came around, the government couldn't connect the dots that you need to honor and respect our nurses, our personal support workers, and all healthcare staff with the pay and benefits they so rightly deserve. After all, the people at Muskoka Algonquin Healthcare cited their number one issue is staffing, and primarily because they're not getting the respect that they deserve. We also have to recognize that we can take a massive amount of burden off of our current system by investing in the north of our riding and ensuring that they get the nurse practitioner-led clinics that they so rightly deserve. And that when it comes to our elderly having the dignity to live, and when it comes to their end of life with palliative care, that we're no longer asking hospice in Huntsville, where I am right now, to fundraise 60% of their operational budget. We have to prioritize a better way forward to get our hospitals and our healthcare funding.
You know what? You couldn't have given me a better transition. I apologize for interrupting, but Enid asks, do you support full funding for palliative end of life and palliative respite beds at Hospice Muskoka?
Mm-hmm.
Matt, you may as well finish that sentence if you want to finish that thought.
I'd love to jump in on this one. You know, since 2007, but more from 2012 on, seeing the care and the dignified care that hospice provides, that our palliative care provides, it is beyond shameful that the current situation happens. And every year we attend the Hike for Hospice. Every year community gets together and rallies in different ways to fundraise in the other events as well. That's wonderful, but it shouldn't be necessary. We're one of the only jurisdictions in the world where we treat seniors and elderly as a burden when it comes to this. This scenario is shameful. We need to celebrate and honor our elders with the care they so rightly deserve. It's right in our platform within the healthcare that absolutely we're going to ramp up funding for our hospice and palliative care so that we can move forward and not see scenarios like this happening into our future.
Thank you. Erin, I think you were about to speak to that as well.
Yeah, so my mom actually died in a hospice in 2016, and I got to see firsthand how that's different than when I spent time in the hospital with my grandpa dying the year before. So we need to expand the network of hospices. We need to fund them. We need to work with our community care providers to establish that compassionate care so that they're not hiking for hospice and swimming for hospice and everything else to provide an essential service. We need to ensure that every Ontarian who seeks medical assistance in dying can get that help with dignity and without hassle. And we need to ensure that terminally ill children and their families are provided with the supportive end-of-life care that they need, which is different than, you know, say a senior or an adult needs. So we need to provide that. So yes, to answer your question, the NDP is committed to this, as well as to the beginning of life care, you know, with the giving birth and, you know, seeing ourselves out. These are two end opportunities that we have the opportunity to deal with dignity. And we would invest in both of those.
Doug Maynard, yes or no on full funding for hospice?
An absolute 100% yes. I've also experienced the difference it makes having a facility like a hospice, palliative care versus leaving somebody to die in the hospital. I think we also need to expand funding for those who choose to deal with their palliative care at home. There's a lot of red tape involved with that, and somebody dealing with a loved one going through the end of their life shouldn't have to deal with that. It should just be an automatic go for it. And there's just no question that the hospice palliative care needs to be 100% funded.
Thank you. And Brad, did you want to speak to that?
I do. I can almost echo Doug a little bit there. It absolutely needs to be supported and funded. I had my mother-in-law pass away in hospice care. Wonderful people, very caring people. They should not have to do walkathons or anything to raise funds. We should be supporting these people. And also to something that was mentioned earlier, also with the support for PSWs, there are people who would prefer to be at home and want to be in their own home. We need to increase the wage for PSWs, increase the number of PSWs that we have so people can stay in their home, live with dignity, as Matt was saying earlier. This is, again, absolutely something that nobody should have any argument with. And it is a shame that the Doug Ford government has put a cap on how much people can make in this field. It's absolutely necessary, incredibly honorable field that we should show a lot more respect to.
Thank you all for that. We are going to end on a business question that is really important to all of us. Pandemic shutdowns really hurt small businesses. Does your party have a plan for recovery? I'm going to spin the wheel here, and I think I'm going to go to New Blue first. Doug Maynard, please. Did you hear the question?
New Blue is 100% against any type of further lockdowns, shutdowns, any of that kind of stuff. We would do everything it takes to prevent that from ever happening again. We believe that people that have been harmed because of Doug Ford's ridiculous measures, those people need to be taken care of. And New Blue is 100% behind working towards making restitution to those people, getting them back on their feet and treating them with the dignity that human beings deserve. And people of Ontario deserve far better than a government that just turns their back and selects random things like lockdowns. We'd
go to Matt
100%
Richter,
behind that.
Sorry, did I cut off too early there, Kelly? Sorry.
No, you were good.
No, I was right on time. Nope. Just because it's right across the screen from me, I'm going to Matt Richter. So does your party have a plan for recovery?
Yeah, it's quite a multifaceted plan, but I'd like to focus on two key areas. One begins by looking at what happened before the pandemic, and then even more so, it was the concern more so during the pandemic. It was the concern around unnecessary red tape. Now, obviously, there's rules and regulations that need to be in place, but there's so many for our small business owners, our farmers in our area, from everything from food production right through to those who are just making things meet the needs of people to reduce the cost of living. They're being burdened by red tape. So we need to overview all the different unnecessary measures that need to be put in place. But specifically, when it came to the staycation tax credit that the Conservative government brought in, it was a good start, but it was a half measure. We're expanding that staycation to also include the hospitality industry, in particular the restaurant industry, so that people can be incentivized to be able to get out and if the means are there, to go to the restaurants and support our restaurant industry that was decimated during this time.
Erin Horvath.
So yes, the NDP, like I said at the beginning, very much in favor of small businesses. Some things to look forward to. 2 more small business recovery grants, one in 2022 and one in 23. That's for folks who are having a hard time being profitable. So not all businesses, but the ones that are still struggling. Commercial insurance has gone up. Mine personally went up 30% in the last 2 years, 50% in the last 4 to 5 years. We need to regulate that as we need to do for auto insurance and housing insurance. So include small businesses under that. Commercial tenancies are not regulated, much like we need rent control, much like we have for residentials, so that we don't have our lease come due and then it goes jacked up. The staycation rebate, $1,000, we need to be offering that to try to encourage people to stay home and stay around. And then no more shutdowns. Personally, that's what I will be advocating for, is if there has to be, we make regional based decisions, but we cannot keep shutting our small businesses down and leaving our large box stores open to make record profits. Clearly someone is not for the little guys. And I know that because I'm one of them.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And Brad?
Yes, as a small business owner, I mentioned being in IT, I also run a farm here in Burkes Falls. So I understand the red tape, and I understand our party's platform is to eliminate the overburden and the overbearing government and let people run their business. As Doug said, we are totally against lockdowns, absolutely 100% against lockdowns. That will not happen again. And we're in an area where we can encourage, which is going to come back around to healthcare. We can encourage people to get outside and get some exercise, get some fresh air. We can encourage the hospitality industry or encourage people to come up from down south and get some, breathe some air that you don't have to chew and swallow, and just increase the that business in this area. So we can do a lot to promote that, and we can do a lot to cut the cost of running a business up here by eliminating, again, so much of the bureaucracy, so much of the administration and the red tape wrapped around trying to get a small business off the ground.
Perfect.
Thank you. As we go into closing statements, we're going to go in reverse order from when we started, which means that Erin, are you ready for your closing statement? That was our last question.
I think I went first though. So did you say you're going in reverse?
Oh, I'm sorry, going in reverse. My apologies. And I looked at the number one off the top. So really, it's the other way around. It's actually Brad Waddell. Thank you, the Populist Party, Ontario. Brad, thank you for bearing with me.
So before you start, Brad, I'll just let you know that I'm going to give you a 1 minute warning. So you have 2 minutes for closing. I'm going to give you a 1 minute warning. With one finger up means 1 minute. And Doug, would you prefer that I interrupt you, or do you want to time yourself?
No, I've got a timer here. I'll time myself, thanks.
Sounds good. All right, take it away, Brad.
Okay, as a closing statement, I would just like to speak to the people who have not yet made a decision in this election. There are so many this time around that are disillusioned with the heritage parties, don't feel like there's a real choice. The reason I'm sitting in this seat is because I was disillusioned with the choices we have. I think that climate is right to let some new blood come into leadership. And again, the Populist Party is people who have not done this before. We know what it's like to run a business. We know what it's like to try and live on a normal income. We know what it's like to lose your wage through the last 2 years when nobody in government took a pay cut. Nobody missed a day's work in government while they were locking out your businesses. We can appreciate what you're going through. We are you, and we're asking your support in this provincial election to have people in Queen's Park who understand what it's like, who are frustrated again with the government overreach, with the control they're trying to get over our lives, and to let us be free, let us go again. A lot of young people are telling me they don't really understand what's happening in the government, and they're having to understand more because it's blindsiding them. We want to have more transparency in government. We want to let you have more control over your life, over where your tax dollars are going. A great statement I heard the other day, a gentleman said, I wouldn't mind paying taxes if the government would just stop wasting so much of it. We want to run it responsibly, logically, use some common sense, and that's what we want to do.
Thank you, Brad. And I'm so glad that I was reminded to go in opposite directions. So that means I'm on who went third. Now goes second, Matt Richter of the Green Party.
All right, well, thank you. And thank you to the organizers and everyone tuning in. I'm very proud of where we're at right now from a forum like this in terms of the questions and the issues we brought up. Naturally, there were some that I'm certain were missed that would like to be spoken. And I always use that as an open invite to be very clear and transparent and collaborative, that please do not hesitate to reach out moving forward to hear the solutions that we're offering if the questions didn't get answered this evening. We heard everything from broadband tonight to racism and the need to stamp out racism and discrimination and hate. We heard an overwhelming need for action on affordable housing. And then, of course, in our healthcare, the ongoing healthcare crisis, which also so desperately needs real action when it comes to our mental health services. And of course, climate, unfortunately, wasn't brought up too much, but I know that could be on its own as a form as well. Everyone, I'm seeing this from one election to the next. You're sick of the status quo. We're ready to move on. You're wanting strong leadership, independent leadership that can be a real reasoned voice for you down at Queen's Park. You're looking for action to tackle the affordable housing crisis, to bring fairness for small business, to ensure that our hospitals are functioning properly and meeting the needs, and to ensure that there's action towards the climate. We're in a robust campaign right now with the Green Party here in Parry Sound-Muskoka. Over 1,000 signs on private properties, over 350 volunteers, over 30,000 doors have been knocked or phoned to, and we're hearing you. You're hearing the inspiration going right now. It's a two-way race between the Conservative and myself, and moving forward, the opportunity now is more than ever to change the color of this riding to a color that represents working across party lines, working in a wholesome way with honesty and integrity. On June 2nd, I humbly ask for your support to vote for myself, Matt Richter, and really deliver the strong leadership that we've been so desperately requiring to bring change forward. Thank you,
Matt. Thank you very much, Matt. And over to Doug Maynard of the New Blue.
Thank you. As I said at the beginning, I truly believe that this election coming up is so important for all of us. There's no question that we've watched our country and this province sink further and further down, and the bottom line is it is because of our government. We've grown used to the system of government that tells us there's only a limited number of options. You vote conservative until you get sick of them, then you vote liberal till you get sick of them, then you go back to conservatives. I'm here to remind everybody that change is possible. Change is able to happen now if we have the courage to ask for change and vote for change and start holding government accountable. Part of the reason I decided to join New Blue and run as their candidate was the party's willingness to acknowledge that an MVP is elected by the people in the riding to represent that riding. They're not there to represent the party leader's interests. We've seen too often with especially Doug Ford's Liberals or Doug Ford's Conservative government lately. If you don't agree with him, he'll kick you out of the party. You speak up for your riding over what he wants, he'll kick you out of the party. New Blue has given their MPP candidates the opportunity to stand and be a voice in Queen's Park for the riding, not for the party. And if you feel the same way I do, that MPPs should be there for the people that elected them, I really encourage you and I humbly ask you, vote New Blue on June 2nd. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Erin Horvath of the NDP, your closing statement, please.
So thank you everybody for taking the time once again. As we close, I want to just encourage us to look at the issues objectively and with an open mind. Personally, I have voted every different way, always looking at the issues. And as a businesswoman, when I look at the issues right now in our riding, like I said, we have businesses that cannot grow because we don't have workers, and we have workers that cannot live here because there is a lack of housing, childcare, transportation, and wages that can pay for life, right? So the NDP offers us something that I think is worth us looking into. We can begin to deal with that worker shortage, fill our small businesses, and then grow our economy back. And we can do this in a way that addresses our climate justice needs in a way that meets all of our the Paris Accord agreements. So we are on our way to do that. As far as environmental, we didn't, like Matt said, we didn't really talk about it, but Dr. Gordon Laxer, who is one of the nation's climate leaders, has endorsed me as the strongest candidate in this regard. He lives in Gravenhurst. And the reason is two things. One is the skill set that I bring, which I explained at the beginning. And the other is that the NDP understands that the climate issue is not to do with people's ignorance. It's to do with power and folks wanting to get rich at the expense of most of us, right? So a few people want to get rich at our expense. So we have the opportunity to change that around. Please consider voting for me. Complex issues is what I've dedicated my life to. I'm not trying to be a lifetime politician. I measure what I do by the grassroots change that I can create. I'm prepared to put my 25-year plus skills and service to our riding. Regardless of what party's in power, I have the skills to build across sectors and to see quality of life change in our riding. So on June 2nd, please consider voting for me, Erin Horvath with the NDP. It would be my pleasure to serve us.
Erin, that's good.
All right, thank you. First, I want to thank the over 40 people at one point were watching this evening and hung in for this. I want to thank all of the chambers, Gravenhurst Chamber, Bracebridge Chamber, the Muskoka Lakes Chamber, the Huntsville Lake Bays Chamber, who with Kelly so deftly behind the scenes working things out. And thank you to Brenda Rhodes and Adam Crockett and to Kelly and her team. I'd also like, of course, to thank the candidates. I want to thank Brad Waddell for coming here tonight, for Doug Maynard, for Erin Horvath, for Matt Richter. And I also wanted to point out that Mr. Cox he wasn't able to, he tried to get on tonight and had technical difficulties and couldn't reach us tonight. So I want to thank all of you for trying to get on tonight and being with us. That was Andrew John Cox. I want to thank the Lakeland Association of Realtors for sponsoring this and helping us make it happen. I am not Pamela Steele of Metroland. Believe me, being a little nervous, I would have loved to have made sure that she was able to get on this evening. Tomorrow, Advanced polls open tomorrow. Some of you may have already voted in different ways. You can also still mail in your vote. We urge you all to vote now or before the election on June 2nd. It is so important to voice your choice, and you've heard a lot of different choice this evening. So thank you, be well, stay safe, and have a wonderful evening. Good night.
Thank you all. Take care. Bye, everyone.